Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very, very accomplished professional from the world of arts in India, Vasundhara Das. Vasundhara, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ashutosh.
Vasundhara is a singer, actor, drum circle facilitator, and partner at Drumjam. She's done iconic songs like Shaka Laka Baby, Where's the Party Tonight, It's Time to Disco, Papu Can't Dance, Salame, Secret of Success, and a host of songs in Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, and Kannada. And, a lot of our foreign audience may not know these, but these songs are absolutely incredibly popular in our country, in India. Her films include incredibly successful movies like Hey Ram, Monsoon Wedding, Citizen, Ravan Prabhu, Lankesh Patrike. Sundar has also worked with composers like A.R. Rahman, Vishal Shekhar, Shankar Ehsaan Loy, to name a few. And as I mentioned a little while earlier, she's the partner at Drumjam. So, Vasundhara, what an amazing journey you've had. Tell me what got you started in the world of music and films?
I think the world of music was around me as a young girl, and it was quite a no-brainer for me to be in music. I seem to have it in my genes, in terms of, like my grandmother's, genealogical gift of
Okay.
the voice
Uh-huh.
basically came to me. But then, of course, I have to credit my parents in supporting an artistic journey through my younger years,
Mhm.
wherein they really persevered. I would say more than I did,
Mhm. Mhm.
making sure I got the right teachers at the right time, had the right exposure, and also also the drive
Mhm.
encouraged me in terms of sort of keeping at it, because something like the arts are quite self-driven in terms of your passions, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
And so, to a large extent, if this mahal around you isn't conducive to the arts, then it's quite easy to drop them.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so I have to really credit my entire family for
Mhm.
having put up with those early years of riyaz at 6 a.m. and things like that.
Mhm.
And so, going forward from there, of course, alma mater plays huge roles in
Right.
the journeys that we take. And of course, I was fortunate enough to be an alumnus of Mount Carmel College in
Mhm.
Bangalore, which
Mhm.
is very well known for its encouragement of well-rounded personalities,
Mhm.
and also their encouragement of women in multiple fields.
Mhm.
So their focus on academics is not just single-mindedly
Mhm.
driven. They
Mhm.
were also really, really open to having us girls take up all kinds of different things. And
Mhm.
so we came out of there being really adventurous and fearless
Mhm.
um, individuals. And so these are some of the things that.
Amazing. Amazing. Right in the beginning, you said, in passing about the genealogical gift of your grandmother.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I'm ignorant, but who was your grandmother?
My grandmother's name was Indira Das.
Okay.
She was a student of Hindustani classical music,
Okay.
very passionate about Hindustani classical. My grandparents lived in Delhi for a time. And
Okay.
during their stay in Delhi, my grandmother, was part of the first batch of people that put together what is now known as Gandhar Mahavidyalaya.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
she was the first. I think she was one of the first secretaries of Gandhar Mahavidyalaya, and I don't know if you've heard of Pandit Vinay
I
Chandraji,
have.
who was the founder of Gandhar Mahavidyalaya. So she was quite, like his, in his core team, and really helped him in whatever way she could.
Hmm.
But then when they moved back to Bangalore, she continued this dream of running a music school at home,
Hmm.
which she did. So around the time that I was born, I remember, I mean, I think all of my aunts and older cousins were all parading in and out of our house
Mm.
because they were, studying music from some guru or the other that my grandmother had, brought in.
Amazing, amazing. And you also mentioned about Riyaz at 6 a.m. in the morning. For someone who must have been very, very young at that time, where did you get that inspiration from?
I have to say, I'd love to take that credit, but
Okay,
but
okay.
that has to go to my mom because
Uh,
you hear of all of these stories of all the greats of Indian classical music, and they're woken up at 4 a.m., to do riyaz and things like that. In my house, thankfully, it was 6 a.m. I was kicked out
okay.
of bed every morning
Right, right.
to do my saregamas.
Mm.
And I still hear moans and groans of about it from my aunts who used to live across the street from me. That
Mm.
those first years were really painful for us.
Correct.
But again, my mom was the one that used to literally drag me out of bed in the early years. And
Mm.
of course, when I knew there was no way out, I started to get out and start doing it on my own.
Fantastic. Till you actually started to enjoy it, and that was then the self-motivation, I would imagine.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Wonderful. So,
The
Vasundhara,
rudimentary years are always a little bit
I,
difficult,
I
you
agree
know.
with you. So, Vasundhara, let's talk a little bit about once you had, trained yourself and you'd got so many different kinds of talents that you had honed. What got you involved in films and music? And, tell me a little bit about that journey.
I think I was in my seventh grade in school when I made the big decision of my life. What do I want to
Hmm.
be when I grow up?
Wow. Mm.
And so, that's when the answer was music.
Mm.
Um, I don't know where this conviction came from. I
Mm.
don't know with what strength or because there was nobody in the family that was in the entertainment business,
Mm.
and sometimes they say that you need a foot in the door to kind
Mm.
of get any.
Correct.
There was no one like that for
Mm.
me.
Mm.
Um, but I remember informing my parents, who had up until then really been very sort of pushy or, supportive on the verge of pushy
Mm.
for me to be, having music as an option of
Mm.
whatever sort.
Mm.
Um, I remember informing them that this is what I wanted to do full time in
Mm.
seventh grade. And I remember the look of fear in their faces
Mm.
because, they had gambled for it to be a hobby
Mm.
at most. But then, this thing of doing it full time was a bit daunting for them as well,
Mm. Mm.
um, naturally so.
Absolutely.
Um, but I think from then on, I would say that the way I was listening to music, the way I was consuming music up
Mm.
until then was, just like any other teenager might have.
Mm.
But something shifted once I had made that decision for myself,
Mm.
wherein, whether it was me in front of a mirror singing at the top of my lungs,
Mm.
whatever it might be,
Mm.
I was doing it then with purpose.
Mm.
There was a definite goal.
Amazing. Amazing.
And so
Yeah.
I think those 3 years were really quite transformative in the sense that I from from it being an idea, it became a conviction.
Mm.
And then I got into Mount Carmel's, which was again quite instrumental in my musical journey because that's when I was on stage in front of a not necessarily appreciative audience for the first
Mm.
time. And
Mm.
those are huge lessons for
Correct.
you if, in the world of performance. You
Mm.
kind of assume that when you're doing something like music and you get up there on stage,
Mm.
your audience is going to, melt and be appreciative and all of that. But Mount Carmel's was a great leveler
Evelyn.
in that sense. So I remember the first time I got on stage, I was so nervous, and this
Mm.
was like a, an auditorium full of screeching, booing women.
Wow.
And to
Amazing.
stand there and to still go ahead and sing was very, very daunting. And I remember forgetting lyrics on stage
Mm, mm,
and totally letting my fear get the better of me. This was,
mm,
I think, when I was in my first year, what we call pre-university
mm,
college in
mm,
Karnataka.
mm,
And they got under my skin. I
mm,
allowed it to happen. And
mm,
this was, I think, the biggest lesson I have learned.
mm,
And then standing there and wondering what to do because I still had 5 more minutes of
mm,
time to fill, and I didn't know the words, and I'd forgotten the tune, and my fear had totally got the better of me. And I remember sticking it out there for those 5 minutes. I don't have a clue what I sang.
mm,
I remember making up words, making up a tune, and then getting off stage, being booed off,
mm,
literally.
mm.
And the feeling of being booed off stage has stayed with me so clearly. I never ever wanted to be in that position again.
Wow. Mm,
And I think that again was a big game changer because the next time I was on stage and I opened my mouth to sing, there was dead silence, pin drop
amazing.
silence
Mm,
for the next 5 minutes that I was on stage. And then things got to move ahead.
amazing. And as they say, the rest is history, right?
Something like that, yes.
Fantastic. So again, tell me, you sung such incredibly iconic songs with some of the top music directors and composers. What were some of your early songs, and how did it feel when you got these incredibly popular songs, which must have led to global adulation?
Um, so actually, in a lot of cases, you hear about the fact that people wait their turn and sort of
Mm,
wait for success to come to them. In my case, what happened was that right after I finished my degree, which
mm,
my parents were quite clear about that I
mm,
needed to do that, um, I went in search of the break, the
mm,
opportunity.
mm,
And so I think first came, this what kind of a musician did I want to be? Did I
mm,
want to jump into the films where, in my young mind at the time, it
mm,
was simple
mm,
because somebody was writing everything. Someone was making the music, someone was writing the lyrics. It was easy.
mm,
Did I want to go the easy way, or did I want to really sort of persevere and put out something that was me or something
mm.
that was a little more personal? So
Correct.
the choice was between going into the movies, the playback singing route,
Mm,
or to do an album or to
mm,
write your own original music. And so, being the kind of person I am, I chose the latter.
mhm,
I decided that the first thing I wanted to do was for people to think of me and listen to me, to my
mm,
true voice.
mm,
And so I wanted to put out an album. I went and auditioned for at a record label called
mm,
Magna Sound,
mm,
and got a record deal.
mm,
And then I started working on a demo. It was an R&B English demo
mm,
with a producer from Canada called
mm,
Praveen Mani.
mm,
And once we started working on this demo, somewhere along the way,
mm,
Praveen introduced me to Rahman.
mm.
And so that's really how,
Wow.
the quiet segue happened.
Mm,
But, I think I was so into that whole space of writing my own stuff and
mm,
putting out my own album that
mm,
I didn't really think of playback singing or movies or any of
mm,
that stuff at the time
mm, mm,
until the opportunity actually came to me. And the
mm.
first time that happened was from, again, Rahman. He
Wow.
wanted to record me in a film called Mudalvan,
Mm,
which is a Tamil movie where I sang Shakalaka Baby.
okay.
And so that was my first commercial recording, whereas I had
Amazing.
been doing a bunch of recordings for my
Mm,
album already before that.
mm,
And so, what kind of a record? The process is very unique. Rahman's process
mm,
is really
mm,
unique.
mm,
He comes up with an idea and he likes to collaborate,
mm,
which is really nice because then it's not just his song; it's your song too.
mm,
And so I went in there with absolutely no other, baggage of how playback singing is
Mm,
usually done.
mm, mm.
And so it was really refreshing for me because it was like two friends collaborating on something that
Amazing.
they're really having fun doing,
Mm, mm. And had you
So,
done other songs with Mr. Rahman also?
yeah, a few, yes, quite a
Okay.
few.
Mm. And then of course you worked with other composers like Shankar Ehsaan Loy, Vishal Shekhar, and others.
Yes.
What is it like, or what is the dynamics between a composer and a singer?
Again, it's very subjective, Ashutosh, because it really depends on your personalities. Each singer will have a different rapport with music composers. I'm not somebody that was waiting in the lines to be in the
Hmm.
film music business.
Correct.
It's something that just happened to me.
Hmm.
And so the way I interacted with them was quite different. I never
Hmm.
called anybody sir. I never, it was a collaboration
Sure. Sure.
whenever I walked through the door.
Sure.
And I think that for me, it was really important for all of us to enjoy the experience and to have,
Hmm.
uh, I mean, that's what shines through in any kind of art, right? Is
Correct.
is what's going on in your heart when you're doing the
Absolutely.
work.
Absolutely. Well said. And over the years, and you've been trained as a classical musician or a singer. Do you see classical music coming back into um, preferences of the listeners?
That's the funny thing. I don't think it's ever left.
Okay.
I think that there has been a very staunch following of classical music, whichever form you might think of, whether it's
Hmm.
Carnatic or Hindustani. There's been a very
Hmm.
staunch following of it, and that just not just comprises of a particular age group of people. It
Hmm. Hmm.
transcends age.
Hmm.
So if you were around when in the years that I was growing up, there were tons of young people following all of these great musicians
Hmm.
to the Spick McKay programs, or there's so
Hmm.
many
Hmm.
programs that were on that were put together by
Hmm.
students, which I think
Hmm.
is still the case.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. No, no, I've been around. I mean, I used to be, a very young manager in ITC Sangeet Research Academy days, and I used to go and meet Mr. Kichlu and all that. But uh, I'm so happy that you're saying this, because I thought, this whole process of rediscovery of classical has started only in the last 5 or 7 years. But it's fantastic to hear, and I don't know so much about the world of music.
Yeah, no, there's always been an audience
Mm,
for the classical forms of music and dance.
mm,
Um, and, it's only what happens is that, when we think of the media and its traditional
mm.
sense, there is only that much of bandwidth for them to talk about the arts.
Correct,
And very seldom do they kind of focus on something that's already been there forever.
correct.
So they always want to talk about what's new.
Absolutely. Okay, wonderful. So let me I've got one more question, music, and then I want to also talk to you about Drum Jam. Uh,
Yes.
Again, as a very senior classical or a singer, how have you seen technology beginning to change music?
In the classical context, I don't see that much of a shift
Hmm.
in terms of technology. For the simple reason that khayal performance is khayal performance. It takes
Correct.
that long. There's no and a performance per se. You're not going to put any gadgets in there and muddy it
Hmm.
as far as the classical form is concerned. But the way that it has transformed the classical music world
Hmm.
is the fact that now there is access to teachers
Correct.
that are not necessarily in the same geographical zone that you live in. So there are a
Hmm.
lot of young, new students of the classical arts in other parts of the world,
Hmm.
whether they're Indian, second generation, third
Yeah.
generation,
Hmm.
or not. There are so many people that want to have access to teach good teachers.
Hmm.
And the online format or Zoom has really opened that up
Hmm.
in quite a big way.
Amazing. Amazing. So let's talk about Drum Jam. You're a partner at Drumjam. Tell me about what you do here.
So at Drumjam is a company that Roberto Narayan, my husband, and I started in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
So here, what we do is we use music as a medium for team building
Mm-hmm.
or for motivation
Mm-hmm.
or so to achieve different HR goals among corporate companies
Mm-hmm.
in India and in other parts of the world. We use drumming as a metaphor
Okay.
to to either deliver certain things about the values that
Mm-hmm.
each organization wants to underline,
Mm-hmm.
or so for a variety of different reasons we use drumming as a medium for communication, a medium for bringing people together,
Mm-hmm.
a medium to set new goals,
And
you
then
name.
can you give me an example of how you use drumming as medium for communication?
Well, you have heard of the saying that music is a universal language.
Absolutely.
The reason why it's a universal language is because of rhythm.
Hmm.
When you break it down, the one way that we are all able to communicate without words is using rhythm.
Hmm.
Rhythm isn't something that always necessarily needs to be taught. It's something
Hmm.
that's within all of us. And
Hmm.
at Drumjam, we believe that if you have heartbeat, then you have rhythm.
Well said. Hmm.
So we use rhythm because of its universality,
Hmm.
and we use rhythm because um, everybody can put a simple rhythm together.
Hmm.
It's something that you can sort of break down to a point where it goes, it puts everybody on a level playing field. And in a drum circle, what we do is that we slowly and simply start to encourage people
Hmm.
to express their own innate rhythmicality.
Hmm.
And then as they start to do so,
Hmm.
they find, as the rhythm evolves through a
Hmm.
session,
Hmm.
they find that, the whole concept of the metronome begins to happen. So what begins to happen is people begin to entrain to each other's rhythms.
Correct.
And then at some point we find that we're all, together and we're all playing the same beat.
Hmm.
So this transition from people's consciousness as individuals
Hmm.
to a consciousness where people are now
Hmm.
playing as an ensemble
Hmm.
is the journey that we take them through a drum jam.
Amazing, amazing. And you also speak about your being a certified drum circle facilitator, which you spoke to me about, but also a circle singing facilitator. What does this mean?
So circle singing is something that was started by Bobby McFerrin.
Mm,
If you've heard the song "Don't Worry, Be Happy."
mm, mm, mm,
So again, the belief is similar.
mm,
Is that we all have basic musicality,
mm,
and we can drone, we can sing, we can hold a note. We all hum in the bathroom. And so to take that concept and to kind of use your voice again as a medium
mm,
is what you do in a circle song. So
Wonderful.
people collaborating, and it's facilitated in a sense where it becomes more musical. So the agenda for both of these things is the fact that we need, as facilitators, to be able to facilitate groups into their optimum musicality.
Well said. And
So it's very different from what a
yep.
performer does.
Mm,
A performer is somebody that performs to an audience, shows their prowess,
mm,
shows their technique. But a facilitator is somebody that helps everybody
mm.
or facilitates everyone get to their optimum musicality. It's a very different world.
Well said. Well said. Thank you. I have time for only one more question, though I could just keep on talking to you. And but I wanted to ask you, and this question is for the many, many thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own amazing journey in the world of music, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away from your journey and from our conversation?
From I think my journey in music, and for me, the most important journey has been from that of me from the stage into the center of the circle.
Mm.
Is that in any kind of conversation or collaboration, when there's conversation all the time from all directions, it becomes cacophony. So there's a very, very important lesson of stepping back and being silent and listening for us all to move forward on the different paths that we choose to walk.
Well said.
So I think that's, the lesson of silence is something that I really carry with me every day.
Fantastic.
A second lesson would really be that there is no meaning to anything that we do if we don't share our spirit. So whatever we bring to the table has to come from the heart, which is when we bring our spirit into it. Otherwise, it's very mundane.
Correct. Well said. Well said. And on that note, Vasundhara, and your amazing lessons, I love this thing of the power of listening and the power of silence. Step back and be silent. Listen to move forward. And second you said was, share our spirit if you want to really be able to explore ourselves. Thank you so much for speaking to me about an absolutely incredible journey. I mean, I don't know too many people who decided in class 7 that their passion was going to become their career, and you seem to have done it so beautifully. Thank you for speaking to me about so many different aspects of music, about your own journey in the world of films and music. And thank you also for speaking to me about Drumjam. Thank you again and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ashutosh.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.